soon after the demise of the communist regime in Central Europe and the decomposition of Comecon, Central European countries looked towards the West, and they expressed their desire to get involved in the process of economic integration that was happening in the western part of Europe. This is actually, I believe, quite an interesting time frame, because it shows you how quickly the whole process from the beginning of the transition 1989 in Poland, how little time has passed between the beginning of the transition and the entering of the Central European countries in the EU. Well, please look at association agreements. Well, as early as 1991, Hungary and Poland signed Europe Agreement, that is Association Agreement. Czech Republic and Slovakia did it in 1993. They came into force in 1994. And why were they important? Well, because they allowed for steady liberalization of trade and the steady introduction of free trade area between EU and potential member states. They also facilitated the enhancement of political dialogue. They facilitated economic cooperation and legal convergence. In 1994, Hungary and Poland, and in 1995, Czech Republic and Slovakia applied for EU membership. And this happens a year after the European Council decides that the Central and Eastern European countries, they are associated with the EU, may in reality become members of the EU. They, however, formulated certain criteria that must be met by those countries in order for them to become members. And those criteria became known as Copenhagen criteria, and they are extremely important. Why? Because they kind of set the whole tone for what must have been done, what must have been taken, all the actions that must have been taken in Central Europe, so to allow those countries to become members of the EU. Let me give you a couple of examples what those Copenhagen criteria were about. Well, firstly, they concern political stability of institutions, guaranteeing democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and the respect for minorities. The second would be probably more interesting to us, taking the fact that this is the economic analysis. So they involve the existence of a functioning market economy, as well as the capacity to cope with future obligations and competitive pressures within the EU. And the last one was that they require that the future member state will be able to take on obligations of membership, including the adherence to the aims of political, economic, and monetary union. To put it simply, Copenhagen criteria define that if Central European countries want to become members of the EU, they must accept all rules that exist within the EU. So they must adjust to the EU regulations. And this was of paramount importance, that no permanent derogation from EU rules was to be accorded to the acceding nations. And this meant that those countries will, in a way, promise that in the future they will not only become members of the EU, but they will also go along with the direction of the integration process, and they will become the members of the Eurozone. In 1998, negotiation starts with the first group of countries, then in 1999 with the second group of countries. And the major principle behind this negotiation may be summarized by well, quite a straightforward motto, which is take it or leave it. So it was all about, if you want to become a member of the EU, you must accept the rules of the game that are set in the EU. In 2003, the accession treaty was signed, and in 2004, 10 countries joined EU. In 2007, Romania and Bulgaria. And now let us analyze what happened. I would suggest that we start with the ex-ante estimates, and those I would like to divide into public perception and economic analysis. So, public perception regarding this fifth enlargement was somewhat mixed. Among old member states, the most commonly shared fear regarding economic aspect of the enlargement, and I would like to emphasize economic aspect, was the one related to the migration and the labor market. The public was afraid that new entrants would migrate, and there would be a considerable transfer of jobs. So in other words, cheap labor from the east would take their positions, would take the jobs from the nationals. They were also afraid of the impact of the migration on social security system in those countries. And additionally, they were also afraid that the fifth enlargement might create additional difficulties to farmers. And this is an interesting point because it seems that the fear for agriculture was shared by both sides. This is exactly what the public in Central Europe was also saying. Among most typical fears in Central European countries regarding the impact of their participation in European Union, we can differentiate the following. And yet again, I'm focusing only on economy, so I'm not talking here about any political, social, or cultural aspect. Firstly, that local companies may not withstand the competition pressure from the old member states. It was feared that the economic growth will slow down. It was feared that the trade balance will worsen, that the prices will go up, and that, as I already said, that the situation of farmers will deteriorate. There was also some doubts about the EU budget, and according to the analysis done in Poland prior to the integration with the EU, some people raised doubts that Poland may become a net payer. Well, something that obviously never happened, and Poland has become one of the most important beneficiaries. Economists were more optimistic. Well, if you look at the economic ex-ante estimates, you would see that they are largely positive. All actually sources point out to the gains for all member states. So not only the new entrants, but also so-called old member states. And those old member states were to benefit mostly from the enhanced opportunities to trade and investment. And what happened? What really happened? So let us look here at the list of ex-post consequences. I enumerated just a few, and obviously they do not exhaust the list of all consequences to the economy of Central Europe. However, I think that those are maybe the most important. The first three, I think, are quite straightforward. So as the result of the EU membership, we could observe the growth of trade between old and new member states, and I would add here also the improvement in the volume of exports and imports as well. Boost of modernization. Naturally, European integration boosted general modernization in the region. The rise of foreign direct investment as the result of more steady environment. Well, the fourth consequence was the enhancement in the standard of living, and I would like to start with the choice of GDP per capita. It is not a perfect indicator, definitely not a perfect indicator to describe the standard of living. However, it is very popularly used, and I think that the changes in this GDP per capita may definitely, give us certain idea of how the economies are going. Are they improving or deteriorating? Well, here, if you compare the data between 2004 and 2010, you would see a significant increase. So let's look at the GDP per capita in 4 countries: Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary. And on average, in 2004, their GDP per capita was at the level of 62% of the EU average. So it was below EU average. It is still below EU average. However, if you look at the same the same data in the year 2010, you would see the increase because in 2010, the average per capita GDP in those 4 countries reached the level of 70%. So you would see 8% improvement. An interesting result is the one regarding within country divergence. Well, it seems that this improvement of GDP per capita and the improvement in terms of the convergence was accompanied by the widening of the gap within the country. Regional disparities grew, and they grew in all new member states. The highest disparities were observed in Slovakia, and then the second position was held by Czech Republic and Romania. The relatively smaller disparities were observed in Poland and Slovenia. And then why do we observe such a situation? What is the source of those regional disparities? Well, it is believed that economic catching up, which is observed in the whole region, seem to be driven by a limited number of growth poles. So, in contrary to old member states where this growth is somewhere more simultaneous in various areas, here in among those new member states, it seemed to be driven by quite a limited number of growth poles. The next consequence, we can actually debate whether it is a consequence of the participation in the EU or general consequence of the transition. Because what we can observe are obviously increased levels of competition and innovation, and also the installation of more flexible economy, yet again, kind of a natural consequence of the whole transition from centrally planned to market economy. And here we could also add the access to bigger markets and the access to the greater choice of products for customers. The last aspect I mentioned here deserves a little bit more discussion, because I would like to focus on changes in the labor market, so something that was feared by old member states. And let us look at the data for Poland, because I think that it is quite interesting. In 2003, unemployment rate in Poland amounted to 20%. It was very high. However, in a relatively short period of time, it was substantially reduced. In 2007, this unemployment rate was reduced to 11.4%. So we would say that macroeconomically speaking, it was a positive consequence for Poland to become member of the EU. However, when we analyze what was at the bottom of those changes, we would see that this was achieved by a very high outflow of Poles who rated among most mobile nationalities in European Union. According to the estimates of Polish Statistical Office, the number of Polish citizens living abroad in 2007 exceeded 2 million. So it tells you something about those migration movements. The most popular destination was UK. In 2011, there were approximately 625,000 Polish citizens living and working in UK. And the second place was Germany, where in 2011 there were 470,000 Poles. And Germany was a more traditional kind of destination of Polish migration. However, it is interesting to notice that this data taken from 2011 refers to the year when Germany opens labor market for Polish citizens, which actually starts on May 1st, 2011. And the results of immigration must be treated cautiously. However, I think that this, as well as many others, will be probably subject for another lecture. So thank you very much.